Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about the concept of universalism and its literature that I believe the United States should embrace. As you can see, I'm going to talk about where this concept came from for me. Anybody read The Count of Monte Cristo or Three Musketeers? It was written by a black French author. He's actually, his mother was Haitian, so he's of African descent. So universalism in literature is the theory that it's possible to apply generalized norms, values, or concepts to all people and cultures. So in layman's terms, I believe that an African author can write literature. It doesn't have to be African literature, it can be just literature. So basically, I'm going to just give a brief synopsis of the African American experience and how it's progressed till now. So in the beginning, there was Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, and basically their literature during this period is based on the realities and harshness of just slave life, Reconstruction, segregation, and these realities are mostly written in a Southern vernacular. Basically, they're writing a narrative of slavery, and it's for a reason. Obviously, they were against slavery, and obviously, Booker T. Washington, after slavery, wrote about how segregation and how we should sort of coexist with white society. After that, W.E.B. Du Bois pushed against that narrative. So literature during this period becomes an instrument of social analysis. It's sort of a radical take on how we should take a stronger stance and how we should integrate in the United States. After that, after we come out of into the 20th century, we talk about how writing during this time, I talk about how writing during this time comes to the forefront of America through structured writing. So writing during this time becomes a prototype to a more realistic style. This man is Langston Hughes. He's considered one of the best poets of his day. He moved to Harlem through the Harlem Renaissance, and through there he talks about black life through jazz and through poetry, and how it intermingles with how we exist and how we should exist in America. So writing during this time takes a more nuance of how we should, exist in America and how we did. But then during the turn of World War II, baby boomers, how the United States sort of progressed after that time, we went back to a more radical thought process. These authors are Richard Wright and James Baldwin, and writing in the early 1960s and 50s it took a more W.E.B. Du Bois approach, where now we're talking about racial issues and prejudice and things of that nature, and we reject ideas that are American. Now we're in the civil rights era. And James Baldwin, he talked about how characters in his book were more international and almost multifaceted sexual actors, homosexuality, and things of that nature. So he broadened the horizons of literature, while also challenging the white consensus during that era. Now, what I want to talk about is realism versus naturalism. And, we have this current narrative of African American literature of being more realist, like critical race theory and thoughts of that nature. But I don't really want to talk about that, but what I want to talk about is realism. It's a literary movement characterized by the representation of real life. So African Americans wrote about what we were familiar with, slavery. After that, prejudice, racism, discrimination. It's depicted in middle-class characters, and realistic novels use themes like society, social class, and ability. Then naturalism is the outgrowth of realism, influenced by scientific theories. It's depicted by lower-class characters, but in layman's terms, naturalism is more of an approach of how we interact with society. And I want to talk about this author who took up that naturalist idea. Ralph Ellison. He wrote Invisible Man, which is a new kind of black hero. He was an unnamed black everyman who makes the traditional journey in African American literature from the South to the North. In the story, the character describes both Northern and Southern cultures, but this particular style of writing, he adapted to an art form where it's not possible to distinguish whether the main character is of African American descent. He doesn't really say in the story, okay, this is an African American character, this is what he goes through, he's going through prejudice, he's just going through regular life, regular problems. Now, basically, due to time, I'll just briefly talk about his life. He was born in Oklahoma. He took up the trumpet at the age of 8. So he attended Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, but he quit. He went to Harlem, where he mingled with Richard Wright and Langston Hughes, who mentored him in his early writing, and he was a merchant marine cook in World War II. And in the second half of his life, after the war, he wrote what was to be The Invisible Man. It was published in 1952. In 1953, he won the National Book Award, actually winning the award over Ernest Hemingway, Old Man in the Sea, which I read before I read The Invisible Man. Interesting, right? And then he died in 1994, he was 16. And I believe that this type of writing died with him. I don't believe that African American authors really write this style because this is a controversial style. I'm meant to mention at the beginning. And it's controversial because as an African American, you want to keep your culture, you want to keep your heritage, and you still want to tell that story of discrimination. But how do you strive with? How do you? Now, his impact on black literature, universalism. As I said in the definition, it's possible to apply generalized norms, values, and concepts to all people and cultures. And he believed that the black experience in America can rise to a level of universal significance. He wanted to be known as an author, not just an African American author, but an author. And his story had an impact on the way African Americans see their lives. So examples of what I'm talking about would be how you see Denzel Washington in movies, or Barack Obama in media, where he's just a president. He was the first African American president, but his mother was white. We see him as a president. So Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, I believe, was a social narrative which demonstrated to African Americans his take on a social naturalism, which is man versus society. A black man in black society and in America, both can be true. Like I said, W.E.B. Du Bois, he believed in a double consciousness. Man versus man. So many times in the story, he's wrong. Villains in the literature can be both white and black. Both can be true. White and black can help him. White and black can be villains. So it doesn't have to be the narrative of the man. At the conclusion of the novel, man versus himself, he realizes he's not invisible after all. He's done things in his life he's not proud of, but he reconciles with himself. So he's a man of humanity. It's not a stereotype. Man versus human nature. He must go against his rage, his natural instinct of anger. However, that goes against stereotype and cultural norms. So he's not, he's not a pimp. He's not some villain or drug dealer in the ghetto. He's a regular man that goes through regular things. So, in conclusion, Ralph Ellison's writings go one step further to express universalism, not only as an African American story, but an American story. And my question is, can we change and publish this type of black literature today? Any questions?